Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Great to see you here on this Sunday morning. For those of you who are watching online, welcome to you. If you've chosen to watch online because of the floods, chickens, these lot all turned up. All right, so thank you very much for being here today. No, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you. My name is Steve. I'm one of the leaders here at The Forge, and just delighted for us to be able to gather together today. Last weekend, our young people went away. They went to a place called Vauxhall Farm, and they had what they called a road trip. And I thought as we start our service today, it would be good to catch up on what happened for our young people last weekend.
We're at Vauxhall Farm for our road trip for our young people. We're here for an amazing weekend. We're looking forward to all the things that we've got happening.
We've got that, Tim.
Welcome to Road Trip 2023!
Got Dan, how's your sleep?
Shocking. Forgot my blanket, had my pillow and everything.
I'm not going to put you
And then just repeat that step.
Jonny, would you mind just coming up and let's welcome Jonny Abbott, please. Woo, 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 woo. So Jonny joined our staff team in 2014 when we launched our Thurston congregation. He led Thurston, he's led and he was also leading here at Debenham when he decided that he didn't want to be with us anymore. And a much better paid job came up. So, no, not really. Jonny, it's great to have you here. Really, really great. Go on, just for those, because it's a year and a bit, really, since you were working with us. So just fill us in on what you're doing currently at the moment.
Cool. I am on the sunny side of Bournemouth, and I work for a college called Moorlands Bible College. And ultimately, Moorlands, it's a little bit like a university, a really small university, that specializes in equipping people who are passionate about Jesus to go and make an impact in the church and world. And so that doesn't necessarily have to be church ministry. It doesn't have to be what Steve did and I did and what Ben does in music. But actually, any kind of ministry, whether that's in the secular world or whether that's within church ministry or in missions or in pastoral work or chaplaincy, anything like that. Moorlands ultimately is a place which we want to help equip you. So we do that through a variety of different programs that stretch from foundation degrees all the way up to master's degrees and a few things in between as well. And my role there is ultimately to help people really pursue their heart for ministry and their longing for ministry and to help really guide them and articulate what it is that God's put on their heart.
Okay, so what do you actually do? So you help people, but what is it that you actually do? Go on.
So my role is completely mixed up in a whole bunch of different things. So a lot of what I do is build connections and build networks with churches, and so I get to come and speak at the Forge again, which is nice, and other churches too. I go and spend time at different Christian events around the country, which some of you may have seen me at there. There's a program called the NCFE program, which is kind of like an A-level in theology, which we partner with church internships in order that we can equip particularly young people, although not necessarily, and help them gain a qualification in theology as they, again, look to pursue what it is that they do. I do a lot of communication stuff and some of the background stuff behind the scenes as well. And actually within the college campus as well. Look to help develop students, and occasionally I get pulled in to do a little bit of lecturing too.
Fantastic. Well, really look forward to what you're going to say about wrestling with moral dilemmas. Before Jonny kind of takes on the message, just take a look at the screen.
Cool. One of the best things about coming back to Suffolk, other than seeing you all and being able to speak to you all and see how you're all doing, is probably seeing my two godsons. They live in Debenham, they come to the church, and ever since they were young, wrestling has kind of been a key part of our relationship. When I go around, it's kind of like bundle time with Uncle Jonny, and they'll kind of like jump off like sofas and land on my ribcage. And when they were young, it was fairly controlled, and it was kind of a matter of how is it that I make sure they don't hurt themselves or hurt each other. As they've got a little bit older, that has turned more into how do I protect my face. And so wrestling has become a large part of what I do with Finn and with Riley. Being a godfather, though, has so many great benefits, and one of the things that I think is absolutely sort of core to my role is to frustrate their parents as much as possible. I think that being a godparent, probably like being a grandparent, is all the benefits of being a parent, but without any of the sleep deprivation or responsibility. I think that's kind of true. And so, for example, there are certain things that I do that I just think are kind of fun. So, for example, whilst their parents will spend a lot of time trying to, this is how you behave at the dinner table, and this is the etiquette that you do, and you use a knife and fork, whilst I'm sitting at the dinner table, I'll say, boys, who do you reckon can burp the loudest? And just watch the carnage unfold. There'll be times where sort of just before they go up to bed, I'll bring out a big bar of chocolate and be like, chocolate tastes better when you eat all of it in one go. And it'll kind of wind up their parents a little bit. My favorite thing that I think I've ever done in terms of winding up their parents has been kind of a lie that I told Finn on his 5th birthday. I said, Finn, if anyone says, what's the magic word is always now. That's the magic word. And it's kind of just this time bomb that I'm sort of sending him to school with. That if someone says, Finn, what's the magic word? He just says, now. One of the areas, though, that I've kind of said, and it's kind of like this on-running joke, and it's a bit of a lie, is that Uncle Jonny is always right, has kind of become a phrase within our relationship. Why is it that they support Liverpool and Man United? Well, Uncle Jonny says that Man United suck, and therefore I support Liverpool, because Uncle Jonny is always right. Why is it that I eat chocolate all in one go? Because Uncle Jonny says it's the best way to eat chocolate, and Uncle Jonny is always right. It's kind of a phrase that we've kind of developed, and it's become sort of a bit of an on-running joke. And it's a joke because it's just so obviously not true. It's just so evidently not right. Of course Uncle Jonny isn't always right. Jonny, of course, isn't right. Except, I imagine that within all of our lives, we probably spend a lot of it kind of with this front screen that makes other people assume that most of the time we are mostly right. We try and kind of have everything together, or we kind of put the perception up at the front of saying, hey, most of the time, with most things that I think, in most of the way in which I lead my life, is the right thing to do, because that's what I'm aiming for, and that's what I want you to think. In reality, though, there's a different question behind the scenes that we probably live with. Not, I am always right, but instead, am I right? Am I right with how that works? I mean, is that really how things go? Is that really how I live my life? Did I have that conversation right? Was I completely honest with how that came about? Did I act sort of too aggressively or too defensively? I mean, are we raising them right? Is that right? Am I right? The other week, I was driving from Oxford to Bournemouth, and as I was driving, I overtook this car, and the back wheel was like completely flat, not like a little bit low, as in like steam and smoke sort of coming out the back of it. And so I kind of pulled up alongside this car, and I started pointing to the back of the wheel, so sort of saying, your tire's flat, your tire's flat. And eventually they kind of pulled over into the lay-by, and I kind of pulled over with them. And it was this woman with her daughter, and she sort of came out and said, yeah, your tire's flat, and if you don't get it sorted, then it's going to cost a lot more, and you might cause an accident. And she was like, okay, well, I'll call the AA, they can sort it out. And I said, well, have you got a spare tire? Because I know how to change a tire, and I can do that. And she was like, yeah, I do. So, I just sort of undid the bolts and took the tire off and put the tire on after jacking it up and unreleased it. And this woman was so grateful. This woman was so grateful that I'd saved her money and saved her time. She was like, can I give you money? And I went, no, it's fine. Let me pray for you. Let me tell you, I was the man, right? I was the best guy. Guys, do you know when you take the bins out and you put it in the bin outside and you just think, what would this house do without me? That's how I felt. I was the guy. I felt like this absolute superhero. I got in my car and I drove off just thinking, I am the guy. In fact, this is so important. This is what I want you all to know. I am such a good guy. Really, seriously, I am so good. I am so good that on exactly the same journey, I waved down another BMW driver using a slightly different hand gesture to let him know that his indicator wasn't working. And he obviously knew because he gave me the same hand gesture back. And it led me with this question after feeling like this superhero and after sort of showing something a little bit obscene to somebody else. What does it mean to really be good? Am I always right? What does it mean to really be a good person? This is kind of a theoretical question that we probably don't ask in that way. We probably don't put it in that terminology, except we probably do inadvertently ask it and probably quite enjoy asking it in a whole bunch of different areas when it's behind a screen. Whether it's on television interviews where they're debating contentious topics, whether it's on YouTube debates, maybe even sports columns, whether it's on gossip magazines or reality TV, whether it's in the newspaper columns or on the culture wars that we see on Twitter or X, or whatever it's called now. We kind of enjoy that because we kind of get to ask this question from a theoretical point where we sit in the same sofa that we watch soap operas on. It's almost real, but it's not. The problems arise when we kind of have to face the muddy water in front of us that seems a little bit more clearer from a distance when it's in our own lives. When we're confronted with people that have different value systems to us and different opinions and ideas to us, and they kind of seem to infect every part of the relationship that we have with them, even the parts of the relationship that have nothing really to do with the things that we might disagree on. They kind of affect our own mind and our own brain in ways that we kind of have to try and contend with actually what is good. And actually, I didn't do that right. And how do I work now in light that I did that thing? There's a whole bunch of different areas maybe that we once would have judged others for, and yet when we partake, all of a sudden there's an excuse. I only did it that one time, not multiple times. Maybe it's kind of just this ongoing thing, and you find yourself in routines that you look back on your own life and just think, there was a time where I just never would have done that. There was a time where that just wouldn't have been me. Maybe it's something where you think, well, at least I'm not them, or at least I haven't done what they've done. We excuse it, we explain it, we hide it away. And we're offered this question, well, am I right? Am I raising them right? Do I pay back now or later? Or are my opinions on this right? Is it too late to change? Am I in too deep? We ask the question, what does it mean to be good? Am I in the right? And it's a question that philosophers of old have asked, whether it's Bentham's utilitarianism, whether it's Kant's deontology, whether it's Aristotle's virtue ethics. People throughout history have tried to piece together kind of systems that allow us to walk the way in which is best to walk. All of them have inevitable downfalls. They lead to kind of universal ethics, universal frameworks that people buy into, and they all eventually fail in different ways. Whether it's postmodernism or Marxism or several other isms, socialism, or whether it's conservatism, liberalism, libertarianism, nationalism, whether it's feminism or whether it's the worst, veganism. You can allow to get back at me for that later, that's unfair. But actually within all of these, they all point to something. They all point to something that actually is true, that there is such a thing as what is good and what is holy and what is pure and something that's worth aiming for. And even though we struggle to define it, and even though we sometimes struggle to achieve it, that there is something good out there that's worth going for. And on the other side, even though we have a complex relationship with it, even though we kind of despise it and yet find ourselves engrossed in it, there is something on the opposite called evil. And somehow we have to reconcile that all of us have feet in both camps. We find ourselves thinking, this is really what I want to aim for, but I'm kind of over here, and what do I do as a result of it? We explain it, we excuse it, we hide it. This is a wrestling match. This kind of should bring us discomfort. This isn't WWE where it's all kind of fake and they all kind of like decide who's going to be the winner and they sort of practice their moves and then perform them in front of others. This isn't me wrestling with my godkids where ultimately it's like me just sort of trying to make things safe and make things okay. This is kind of a scrap fight. This is something that ultimately steals peace. It's a question that ultimately leads with. All of this leads to a peace that's fundamental to the human heart. Where is it that I find my peace from? How is it that I can bring togetherness to the brokenness? That's what peace is, where something's in its right place, in its right form, as everything should be. How is it that I can live a life where I'm not woken up at night by the thoughts of if someone finds out? How is it that I can live a life where I don't have to put my head over each shoulder to make sure that no one's looking? How is it that I can give peace to my brain? How is it that I can try and find the right values and set my life on the right values? How is it that I can get away from the system of ethics that I've kind of put in place where I judge others for things that I am so at risk for falling into myself? How is it that I navigate different relationships that seem to have different ideas about different things that will inevitably cause rifts in every part of my relationship if goodness is the goal and if they're not as good as me? How do I find peace? And one of the beautiful things around following Jesus is that right at the heart of the story of Jesus, Jesus says, hey, listen, I'm going to bring an answer to that question. In fact, there's a point where he's with his disciples, and his disciples are kind of asking this kind of question, and a few others as well, and they're unsure around where Jesus is going to go, and Jesus is saying things like, hey, I'm going to go, and then I'm going to return, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to be resurrected, and they kind of get death, but they don't really get resurrection, and so they're like, well, what does that all mean? And so they're asking these questions. Okay, well, you talk about God the Father. Who is God the Father? Jesus, are we on the right track? Are we good? Are we doing things right? Like, give us an indication of what's to come. Tell us, how are we doing? Where are we going to find this peace from Jesus, particularly when you go? And Jesus says this. Jesus replied, all who love me will do what I say. My Father will love them, and we will come and make our home with each of them. Anyone who doesn't love me will not obey me. In other words, you want this peace thing? You want this peace thing? If you want unity, do what I say. I mean, that's your ethic. Do what I say. I've got an answer for you. And he continues. If there is a next slide, here we go. And remember, my words are not my own. What I'm telling you is from the Father who sent me. I am telling you these things now whilst I am still with you. But when the Father sends the advocate, which is the Holy Spirit, my representative, that is the Holy Spirit, the personal presence of God who dwells among us, he will teach you everything and remind you of everything I have told you. In other words, this ethic, this goodness, it's not going to be found in a philosophy or a system. It's going to be found in a person. And Jesus kind of wraps up and he says this. I am leaving you a gift, peace, togetherness, wholeness, things as they were always supposed to be, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give, Jesus gives, not a system, not a philosophy, not a ranking system that we kind of put in place so that we feel better, not a togetherness which you can kind of hide and make everything seem okay. The peace that I give the world cannot give. You can't find this anywhere else. So don't be troubled or afraid. And this is such a better ethic than the kind of, if I don't name it or if I can explain it, then I can get away with it. It is such a better ethic than when it comes to, if I can just do as well as I can until I can't anymore, and then I get weighed down by the guilt, and I'll try as many different things in order to try and take the weight of guilt off as I can. It is such a better ethic than that, because it offers not just a thing or a to-do or another task, but a person. And we find this in the New Testament in a story that's kind of weird, and you may have read it and been like, what's that about? Or you may have had it explained and been like, okay, I kind of get that, but I still don't really get that. And there's kind of questions that maybe we've learned to ignore a little bit in it. But we find it in the New Testament in a book called Acts, which is kind of the story of how the church emerged after this death and resurrection of Jesus, this event that people couldn't possibly ignore anymore. And we find it in this book of Acts, and it tells this story of this Roman soldier called Cornelius. Now, the things that we know of Cornelius, and you can find this out in Acts chapter 10, just at the beginning if you want to read it, the things that we know of Cornelius is that he's a Roman soldier, which brings some complexities because he was kind of like occupying the Jews, and they kind of weren't particularly happy about that. And as well as that, though, he was kind of prayerful, and he gave to the poor, and he feared God. So there's this kind of complex relationship that he was kind of supposed to be the enemy, but he wasn't really the enemy because he kind of did the right things. But Cornelius had this vision of this angel who came to him and said, hey, God sees all that you've done, and he wants to introduce himself more to you. And to do that, you need to go and find Peter, who spent time with Jesus and saw a death and saw a resurrection, and Peter is going to come to you. And so Cornelius, this Roman soldier, he gets kind of his servants, because he's kind of a big Roman soldier, and he goes and sends them off to find Peter. And we join the story where Peter is. And this is how the story goes. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approached the city, these are the servants who came to find Peter, Peter went up on the roof to pray. Now, roofs were kind of flat. It's not a really too weird thing to do. This is where they would have prayed. And he became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. We can go to the next one here. He saw heaven open, and something like this large sheet, just try and imagine this with me, a large sheet being let down to earth by all its four corners. Imagine this with me, this is weird. It contained all kinds of four-footed animals, as well as reptiles and birds, and the voice told him, get up, Peter, kill and eat. And now if this was me and you, and if we were praying, and if we were kind of in this moment of sort of like, God, I just need to seek you, and I need to pray to you, and I'm bringing these things, and I'm really hungry, and that was the trance that you were given, we'd think, what a good God. God can give us some food to eat. This would have been something that would have been quite difficult, though. One of the differences between the Jews and the Gentile people, the Gentile that Cornelius was that there was a law that the Jews would have followed. And as a result of this law, amongst a whole bunch of different things, there was this tension between the Jewish people and the Gentile people. And ultimately it said, hey, we are the people who have followed a law that God has given us all this time. And so we kind of think that this new faith, this new Christianity, this death and resurrection of Jesus is kind of for these people because we've been kind of doing it right so far. That's a little bit of an oversimplification, but that's generally what's going on. And we might think that that's a historical tension and a little bit of a distant tension, but I think the spirit of it probably runs through churches today, and we're going to find out how. But within this law wasn't kind of like a changing law or a law that changed from each person to person as different lawgivers would come in. This was an never-changing law, a law that was given to their ancestor Moses, which had guided them into righteousness and guided them into this special relationship with God. And if you've been around church for long enough and heard much about this idea of law, you've probably got a little bit of a bias because you've heard that Jesus has come to fulfill the law, and we'll get to that as well. But you've kind of heard that, and so you get this idea and you get this bias that Jesus is good, law is bad. Jesus is good, law is bad. In reality, when you look through the story of God, all the way from its inception in Genesis, all the way through to Revelation, we don't really find that written about the law. In fact, when you read the Proverbs and the Psalms in particular, it talks about how the person who obeys the law is actually going to be someone who is far more satisfied than the fool who doesn't. The law actually directs us to who God is. The law is good. The problem with the law is that it was unachievable. The law kind of showed you where you messed up. It left this giant hole where you kind of fell into and didn't really know how to get out. And so they kind of put rituals in place and different traditions in place to try and sort of symbolize how they would get out of the hole. But realistically, they couldn't. Realistically, law is good. Following the law is a great thing. The law is a good thing, but Jesus is better. That's the whole idea of the law. And within this kind of law, which is kind of the first 5 books of the Bible, you find all these kind of weird instructions. And one of the weird instructions that we find within the law are the things that Jews can eat and the things that the Jews can't eat. And one of the 2 main criteria that we find when it comes to what Jews can eat and can't eat is this, if we can have it up. When it comes to 4-footed animals, and this is going to sound weird, and you've got to stick with me a little bit. The things that the Jews can eat when it comes to 4-footed animals, they have to have split hooves, and they've got to chew on grass. In fact, it says chew on the cud, which means eating grass, regurgitating it, chewing it again, and then eating it. A little bit weird. And we might think that's such a weird rule. I mean, out of all the things you put in the Bible, like, don't murder, don't have adultery, like, yep, good with that. Don't steal, yep, good with that. Or also with 4-legged animals, don't eat anything that doesn't chew on grass or have split hooves. And it's like, what is that about? But for the Jewish people, this symbolized something so important. It symbolized something so good. It symbolized a story of who God was and who they were. It looked back all the way to the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, and God met with Adam and Eve, and he said, listen, this is what you can eat. You can eat anything from the trees of the garden. You can eat anything that you find in the garden. You can find anything that I am the one who is responsible for sustaining. And whenever you eat from the tree of the garden, it is a reminder to you that I am the one who is responsible for sustaining you. I am your source of life. And inevitably, and you might know the story with Adam and Eve, and they eat from the one tree of the garden that God said they shouldn't, and sin and brokenness weaves itself into every fabric of the world, because that's what sin does. It never stays in one place, right? When you mess up, when you do wrong things, it weaves into every part of your life, including the way in which they ate food. And so like one of the next stories along in Noah, God speaks to Noah and says, hey, listen, you now have to work for your food. You now have to kind of toil for that. You now have to try and work for the things that you're going to eat. And God, being God, says, I'm now going to permit you to eat animals. Hooray. But there's a catch. The animals that I want you to eat have to chew on grass and they have to split hooves. Ways in which you can guarantee these animals are animals that feed on the source that I am responsible for feeding. One step removed. One step removed. I'm going to make it as easy as it is eating fruit from the garden. But it has to be one step removed. Every time you eat from a cow or a sheep, it is a reminder to you that I am still the one who's in control. I am still the one who is the source of your life. I am still the one who is ultimately going to replenish you and refresh you and rejuvenate you. I'm the one who's in control. I am your life source. And so on one side, there were kind of cows and sheep that you could eat. And on the other side, there are pigs who kind of eat everything and other animals who kind of go away and eat a whole bunch of different stuff. And God says, hey, whenever you eat this, it reminds you that I am the source. So it makes sense when all of these animals and all these reptiles are sort of presented in front of Peter in this big sheet that Peter looks at this and says, God, ain't falling for this one. Ain't falling for this one, God. I've read your law. I'm a Jew. I keep to your law. I do all the right things. I do all of the good things. I mean, I don't eat that and I don't eat that. I'll eat that and I'll eat that. But I'm not touching all of that stuff. And Peter says this. Surely not, Lord. I've never eaten anything impure or unclean. But the voice spoke a second time. Do not call anything impure that God has made clean. You see, as it comes down from the sheet, it's like, hey, all of this is clean. All of this comes from God. That stuff's symbolic. It's supposed to tell you that I am your provider, and somehow you've lost that somewhere, and you've sort of seen it as a purity or impurity kind of thing. And again, we might think of this as ancient and abstract and weird and Bible-y, but it speaks to you and me too. Because for each of us, we kind of see things as purity issues. Well, that's good and that's bad, and I'm going to do good, and as long as I do good, that's good. And when I do bad, I'm going to try and explain it and cover it up. And God says, listen, if that's your way of living, if that's your ethic, if you're going to judge other people by that ethic where you can do as well as you can and there are people above you and below you, you are eventually going to fall down. Because this is not a purity issue. This is a source of life issue that I need you to remember. You need to come back to me. The voice spoke, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." And this happened 3 times, and immediately the sheet was taken back up to heaven. And Peter doesn't kind of get this straight away. He kind of is like, okay, well, what was that all about? And then as he's thinking this, those messengers arrive. And we find this. Whilst Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They called out asking Simon, who was known as Peter, had 2 names, a bit more confusing as well as a weird dream. Peter was staying there. Whilst Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Simon, 3 men are looking for you. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them." And so Peter sort of leaves with these people and goes and finds Cornelius. And as he enters Cornelius' house, he kind of like, Cornelius comes up to him and he falls to the floor. As Peter enters the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. But Peter made him get up and said, "Stand up," he said. "I am only a man myself. This isn't about me. This isn't about the laws that I've kept. This isn't about me being above you. This isn't about everything that I can do. This isn't about what I've hidden and what I haven't hidden. This is Peter who denied Jesus 3 times as Jesus died, who recognized that it was such a good thing that it didn't rely on him anymore." And he enters in and he says, "Listen, we're on the same level here. We're all messed up. I'm as good as you are, even though I have all of this tradition, even though I've kept to a whole bunch of laws, even though you don't understand even half of that. You don't stoop down here. I'm just a man. But I know where you can find an answer, and it's not in a what, it's in a who. It's not in a what, it's in a who. I'm only a man myself." And whilst he was talking to him, Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people, and he said to him, "Listen, you are well aware that it's against our law for a Jew to associate or visit a Gentile, but God has shown me, actually it's a source issue. It symbolizes something even more. I'm the one who's going to give you life. I'm going to be the one who gives you grace. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean." This is not a goodness issue. This is a grace thing. If you live your life in a way that says, okay, I'm trying, I'm covering up, and it doesn't come from this idea of, hey, Jesus, I just want to be close to you. When it comes to the moral dilemmas, you may be right in a whole bunch of different arguments that you construct. But the way in which that gets outpoured doesn't help the world. Think about where Peter was on the eve of this moment. Peter, he wasn't constructing an argument in his head for a debate that he probably was never going to have. You didn't find him on Facebook and Twitter finding people that he disagreed with just so he can be like, no, I'm not going to like that one. You didn't find him in a whole bunch of different areas where he was trying to be better and learn to do good. You find him on the roof, praying to his Father in heaven, seeking closeness. And it was in that place that God said, "Listen, this is who I am. I'm the one you rely on. I'm the one you can come to. I'm the one who makes it okay when nothing else is okay. I'm the one who gives you grace. I'm the one who sent Jesus and ultimately to take away the sin, the brokenness, and the pain of the world." And your response to that should be to go and tell others. This isn't a goodness thing. This is a grace thing. And we find this in other moments as well with Jesus, as he goes and finds a rich young man, or a rich young man comes to him and he says, "Jesus, good teacher," he says, "good teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Well, why do you call me good? Only God the Father is good. You know what to do, just obey all the commands." And Jesus is kind of being cheeky because he's like, "Who do you say I am? Who do you think I am?" And the rich young man's like, "Well, I've obeyed all the laws, Jesus." And Jesus is like, "Great. What happens when you don't? Go and sell everything and follow me." It's not about a what, it's a who. For so many of us, we've heard this before, and we may have ingrained it in our lives, and it's kind of become like a lullaby for us. But the way in which we act still spends so much time trying to make sure that everything on the front looks like it's all pieced together. We hide the garbage behind us. When it comes to the response of those who perhaps disagree with us, it's a matter of how much can we get right so that they look wrong. And actually, Jesus says, listen, it's not about a what, it's a who. When you wrestle with moral issues, our first response is Jesus. Our first response is his word. Our first response is looking at actually who the God of heaven is and who he calls us to be. And in those moments, it is like a wrestling match. It's not a get out of jail free card in the sense that we don't have to work, because there's something about that kind of says, listen, we need to kind of die to ourselves a little bit. There are things that we like to do and want to do and like to agree with and want to agree with that God says, actually, listen, you've got to trust me that there's a better way. And when we wrestle with other people with different value systems to us, there is a level whereby through that we stand with a humility, with a knowledge that actually any of the goodness that we hold within our own lives comes from a God who has shown us grace in the first place. And we stand on the same level of others, and we point people to the direction of who Jesus is. This life-giving, grace outpouring, guilt-relieving God who says, I am the source. This is what grace looks like.
I just want to speak the name of Jesus over every heart and every mind, 'cause I know there is peace within your presence. I speak Jesus. And I just want to speak the name of Jesus till every dark addiction starts to break, declaring there is hope and there is freedom. I speak Jesus, 'cause your name is power, your name is healing, your name is life. Break every stronghold, shine through the shadows, burn like a fire. I just want to speak the name of Jesus over fear and all anxiety, to every soul held captured by depression. I speak Jesus, 'cause your name is power, your name is healing, your name is life. Break every stronghold, break every stronghold, shine through the shadows, burn like a fire. Your name is power, your name is healing, your name is life. Break every stronghold, oh, shine through the shadows, burn like a fire. Shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy, Jesus for my family. I speak the holy name, Jesus. No. Shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy, Jesus for my family. I speak the holy name, Jesus, 'cause your name just want to speak the name of Jesus over every heart and every mind. 'Cause I know there is peace within your presence. I speak Jesus. I speak Jesus.
Hey, thanks to the band for that final song, and thank you for joining us today at the Forge. Just love it that we have a group of people who choose to watch online, and I hope that you found it helpful. In fact, I've got Jonny, who's just off stage. Jonny, would you mind just coming in? Jonny, loved what you've had to say today. Thank you for dealing with this whole issue of wrestling with moral issues. We all have to do that. If there was one thing that you would really want people to take away from this morning, what would it be?
Cool. It would be that line. Goodness is not found in a what but a who when it comes to a whole bunch of different moral dilemmas, whether it's the things that infect our minds and affects the way in which we behave, or maybe it's something that infects every part of different relationships that we have with people with differing opinions and different ideas. Putting our faith in Jesus, following him, and putting our whole faith in following him rather than what we do really is ultimately the way in which we can find the thing that we're all looking for, which is peace.
Wonderful. Jonny, thank you. Just to let you know that we have coming up in November our Fire and Ice fundraiser. If you live locally and were able to join us, please do. You can sign up via our website, forgechurch.com/challenge. And next week we start a brand new series. It's called Investigating Jesus. Take a watch.